Hey guys, it's Mean here, and I just wanted to give you guys some important information before we get into this video. So, as I'm sure you're aware, if you haven't been living under a rock, we are going through incredibly distressing times right now, from the literal genocide happening in Gaza to families being torn apart by ICE agents. The LGBT National Suicide Hotline was just eliminated by Trump yesterday. Now we have the Iran and Israel conflict. There's just a lot going on. And if you're like me, you work a lot, and I work on weekends. If I didn't work on weekends, then I literally wouldn't be able to afford rent. And unfortunately, a lot of the major protests that happen occur on weekends or during hours when I work, and that has been incredibly frustrating. And if you are in a similar position, I wanted to share with you guys some things that you can do besides protesting. I mean, even if you can't find childcare, or you have physical limitations that allow you to not necessarily be in the streets, I wanted to share some things that you can do to support these movements, things that I do, things that I find to be effective. And yeah, so I just want to share that with you guys. So the number one thing is to harass your representatives. Harass politicians. That's what they're there for, is to listen to you. And if they're not listening, make them. Send them obnoxious letters. You can, an idea I saw on Instagram is you can make cardboard letters if you have recycled cardboard, and those stand out a lot. And you can write very simple direct messages on them that will get representatives' attention. Don't be afraid to make them feel bad if they've been making decisions that don't align with the general morals of humanity. Another thing that you can do is donate. There are lots of mutual aid accounts where you can donate to people who you can actually see and read their stories, and you know that even if you aren't able to give a ton of money, that every $5 or $10 matters in that person's day. So giving to mutual aid, incredibly helpful. I mean, what is community for if not for supporting each other with whatever we can? There are so many organizations that are helpful that probably you wouldn't even think of. For example, I'll link below, there's a group called Bikes for Migrants that I donate to every month. They provide bicycles to immigrants so that they have less of a chance of interacting with ICE officers on public transportation on their way to and from work. And they accept donations of whatever you can give. So yeah, that's an organization that I would recommend, but it's just an example of how there are so many actions that seem small that people are raising money for, but that make a difference in people's day-to-day lives. So yeah, just keep an eye out for things like that. If you're a writer like me, then writing letters to your politicians is important, but also you can post templates of your writing to social media so that those who are maybe not as confident in their writing skills, or who feel hesitant to contact the representatives because of their lack of confidence in their writing skills, by posting templates you can help them. The thing that you can do is outreach in your community. I live in New York City. Right now we have a pretty crucial mayoral election coming up. One thing that I plan to do tomorrow is print out informational cards about Zohran Mamdani, and putting them in my neighbors' mailboxes, putting them just around my neighborhood, to try and get people more involved in that election. You can also, another thing that you can do is phone banking, because who you elect for your local politician is eventually who's going to be standing up to the bigger representatives for you. So you want to elect somebody that you know is going to stand up for you and what you believe in, and isn't going to be afraid to take on the bigger guys. I believe that Zoran Mamdani is going to do that, and so I want to spread the word about him in my neighborhood, and I think that's pretty important. Another thing that you can do is print out those little rights cards for what to do if ICE comes to your house. You can leave those in your place of work. You can leave them around your neighborhood. You can leave them on public transportation, because you never know who might need them. Little community actions like that are, like, just, you never know who it might help. Oh yeah, another thing that you can do is you can support protesters. You can provide, if you're able, childcare for those who are protesting. You can provide supplies for protesters, whether that's water, whether that's umbrellas to protect them from tear gas, goggles for their eyes, whatever that is, whatever you can provide. You can spread awareness about different protests that are happening in your area, ones that people might not know about, ones that might not have as much traction yet. Yeah, and just basically never shut up about the things that are important to you and about the human rights violations that are happening in our world right now, because right now we have a 1% and big countries like Israel that are trying to confuse us and divide us, make us feel scared. And it's working, and these are scary times, but the most important thing we can do is support one another and not shut up and not stop fighting, because that's what they want us to do. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense. And so now let's get into the video. Hi. So today we're going to be reading one of my favorite books from high school, Looking for Alaska by John Green. I also have my pen and my coffee. So we're gonna start with chapter 1, and if you guys like this, then we could potentially read further. So let's get started with Looking for Alaska. Before. 136 days before. The week before I left my family in Florida and the rest of my minor life to go to boarding school in Alabama, my mother insisted on throwing me a going away party. To say that I had low expectations would be to underestimate the matter dramatically. Although I was more or less forced to invite all my school friends, for example, the ragtag bunch of drama people and English geeks I sat with by social necessity in the cavernous cafeteria of my public school, I knew they wouldn't come. Still, my mother persevered, awash in the delusion that I had kept up my popularity secret, from her all these years. Sorry, it's been a while since I've read aloud, so I'm kind of getting used to it again. She cooked a small mountain of artichoke dip. She festooned our living room in green and yellow streamers, the colors of my new school. She bought 24 champagne poppers and placed them around the edge of our coffee table. When that final Friday came, When my packing was mostly done, she sat with my dad and me on the living room couch at 4:56 p.m. and patiently awaited the arrival of the goodbye to Miles cavalry. Said cavalry consisted of exactly 2 people. Marie Lawson, a tiny blonde with rectangular glasses, and her chunky, to put it charitably, boyfriend, Will. "Hey, Miles," Marie said as she sat down. "Hey," I said. "How was your summer?" Will asked. "Okay, yours?" "Good. We did Jesus Christ Superstar. I helped with the sets. Marie did lights," said Will. "That's cool." I nodded knowingly, and that about exhausted our conversational topics. I might have asked a question about Jesus Christ Superstar, except that 1, I didn't know what it was, and 2, I didn't care to learn, and 3, I never really excelled at small talk. My mom, however, can talk small for hours, and so she extended the awkwardness by asking them about the rehearsal schedule and how the show had gone and whether it was a success. "I guess it was," Marie said. "A lot of people came, I guess." Marie was the sort of person to guess a lot. Finally, Will said, "Well, we just dropped by to say goodbye. I've got to get Marie home by 6. Have fun at boarding school, Miles." "Thanks," I answered, relieved. The only thing worse than having a party that no one attends is having a party attended only by 2 vastly, deeply uninteresting people. They left, and so I sat with my parents and stared at the blank TV and wanted to turn it on but knew I shouldn't. I could feel them both looking at me, waiting for me to burst into tears or something, as if I hadn't known all along that it would go precisely like this. But I had known. I could feel their pity as they scooped artichoke dip with chips intended for my imaginary friends, but they needed pity more than I did. I wasn't disappointed. My expectations haven't met. "Is this why you want to leave, Miles?" Mom asked. I mulled it over for a moment, careful not to look at her. No," I said. "Well, why then?" she asked. This was not the first time she had posed the question. Mom was not particularly keen on letting me go to boarding school and had made no secret of it. "Because of me?" my dad asked. He had attended Culver Creek, the same boarding school to which I was headed, as had both of his brothers and all of their kids. I think he liked the idea of me following in his footsteps. My uncles had told me stories about how famous my dad had been on campus for having simultaneously raised hell and aced all his classes. That sounded like a better life than the one I had in Florida. But no, it wasn't because of Dad. Not exactly. "Hold on," I said. I went into Dad's study and found his biography of Francois Rabelais. I liked reading biographies of writers, even if, as was the case with Monsieur Rabelais, I never read any of their actual writing. I liked reading biographies of writers, even if... Oh, I just read that. I flipped to the back and found the highlighted quote. "Never use a highlighter in my books," my dad had told me 1,000 times. But how else are you supposed to find what you're looking for? "So this guy," I said, standing in the doorway of the living room. Francois Rabelais. He was this poet, and his last words were, "I go to seek a great perhaps. That's why I'm going, so I don't have to wait until I die to start seeking a great perhaps." And that quieted them. I was after a great perhaps, and they knew as well as I did that I wasn't going to find it with the likes of Will and Marie. I sat back down on the couch between my mom and my dad put his arm around me, and we stayed there like that, quiet on the couch together for a long time, until it seemed okay to turn on the TV, and then we ate artichoke dip for dinner and watched the History Channel, and as going away parties go, it certainly could have been worse. I'll read another chapter. 128 days before. Florida was plenty hot, certainly, and humid too. Hot enough that your clothes stuck to you like scotch tape and sweat dripped like tears from your forehead into your eyes. But it was only hot outside, and generally I only went outside to walk from one air-conditioned location to another. This did not prepare me for the unique sort of heat that one encounters 15 miles south of Birmingham, Alabama, at Culver Creek Preparatory School. My parents' SUV was parked in the grass just a few feet outside my dorm room, room 43. But each time I took those few steps to and from the car to unload what now seemed like far too much stuff, the sun burned through my clothes and into my skin with a vicious ferocity that made me genuinely fear hellfire. Between Mom and Dad and me, it only took a few minutes to unload the car, but my unair-conditioned dorm room, although blessedly out of the sunshine, was only modestly cooler. The room surprised me. I'd pictured plush carpet, wood-paneled walls, Victorian furniture. Aside from one luxury, the private bathroom, I got a box. With cinder block walls coated with thick layers of white paint and a green and white checkered linoleum floor, the place looked more like a hospital than the dorm room of my fantasies. A bunk bed of unfinished wood with vinyl mattresses was pushed against the room's back window. The desks and dressers and bookshelves were all attached to the walls in order to prevent creative floor planning, and no air conditioning. I sat on the lower bunk while Mom opened the trunk, grabbed a stack of the biographies my dad agreed to part with, and placed them on the bookshelves. "I can unpack, Mom," I said. My dad stood. He was ready to go. "Let me at least make your bed," Mom said. "No, really, I can do it. It's okay." Because you simply cannot draw these things out forever. At some point you just pull off the Band-Aid and it hurts, but then it's over and you're relieved. "God will miss you," Mom said suddenly, stepping through the minefield of suitcases to get to the bed. I stood and hugged her. My dad walked over too, and we formed a sort of huddle. It was too hot and we were too sweaty for the hug to last terribly long. I knew I ought to cry, but I'd lived with my parents for 16 years, and a trial separation seemed overdue. "Don't worry," I smiled. "I's gonna learn how to talk right Southern." Mom laughed. "Don't do anything stupid," my dad said. "Okay." No drugs, no drinking, no cigarettes. As an alumni of Culver Creek, he had done the things I had only heard about. The secret parties, streaking through hayfields. He always whined about how it was all boys back then. Drugs, drinking, and cigarettes. It had taken him a while to kick smoking, but his badass days were now well behind him. "I love you," they both blurted out simultaneously. It needed to be said, but the words made the whole thing horribly uncomfortable, like watching your grandparents kiss. "I love you too. I'll call every Sunday." Our rooms had no phone lines, but my parents had requested I be placed in a room near one of Culver Creek's 5 payphones. They hugged me again, Mom, then Dad, and it was over. Out the back window, I watched them drive the winding road off campus. I should have felt a gooey, sentimental sadness, perhaps. But mostly I just wanted to cool off, so I grabbed one of the desk chairs and sat down outside my door in the shade of the overhanging eaves, waiting for a breeze that never arrived. The air outside sat as still and oppressive as the air inside. I stared out over my new digs. 6 one-story buildings, each with 16 dorm rooms, were arranged in a hexagram around a large circle of grass. It looked like an oversized old motel. Everywhere, boys and girls hugged and smiled and walked together. I vaguely hoped that someone would come up and talk to me. I imagined the conversation. "Hey, is this your first year?" Yeah, I'm from Florida." "That's cool, so you're used to the heat." "I wouldn't be used to this heat if I were from Hades," I'd joke. I'd make a good first impression. "Oh, he's funny. That guy Miles is a riot." That didn't happen, of course. Things never happened like I imagined them. Bored, I went back inside, took off my shirt, lay down on the heat-soaked vinyl of the lower bunk mattress, and closed my eyes. I'd never been born again with the baptism and weeping and all that, but it couldn't feel much better than being born again as a guy with no known past. I thought of the people I'd read about, John F. Kennedy, James Joyce, Humphrey Bogart, who went to boarding school, and their adventures. Kennedy, for example, loved pranks. I thought of the great perhaps and the things that might happen, and the people I might meet, and who my roommate might be. I'd gotten a letter a few weeks before that gave me his name, Chip Martin, and no other information. Whoever Chip Martin was, I hoped to God he would bring an arsenal of high-powered fans, because I hadn't packed even one, and I could already feel my sweat pooling on the vinyl mattress, which disgusted me so much that I stopped thinking and got off my ass to find a towel to wipe up the sweat with. And then I thought, well, before the adventure comes the unpacking. And there are a lot of long sentences in this book. I managed to tape a map of the world to the wall and get most of my clothes into drawers before I noticed that the hot, moist air made even the walls sweat. And I decided that now was not the time for manual labor. Now is the time for a significantly cold shower. The small bathroom contained a huge, full-length mirror behind the door, and so I could not escape the reflection of my naked self as I leaned in to turn on the shower faucet. My skinniness always surprised me. My thin arms didn't seem to get much bigger as they moved from wrist to shoulder. My chest lacked any hint of either fat or muscle, and I felt embarrassed and wondered if something could be done about the mirror. I pulled open the plain white shower curtain and ducked into the stall. Unfortunately, the shower seemed to have been designed for someone approximately 3 feet, 7 inches tall, so the cold water hit my lower rib cage with all the force of a dripping faucet. To wet my sweat-soaked face, I had to spread my legs and squat significantly. Surely John F. Kennedy, who was 6 feet tall according to his biography, my height exactly, did not have to squat at his boarding school. No, this was a different beast entirely, and as the dribbling shower slowly soaked my body, I wondered whether I could find this great perhaps here at all, or whether I had made a grand miscalculation. When I opened the bathroom door after my shower, a towel wrapped around my waist, I saw a short, muscular guy with a shock of brown hair. He was hauling a gigantic army green duffel bag through the door of my room. He stood 5 feet in nothing, but was well built, like a scale model of Adonis, and with him arrived the stink of stale cigarette smoke. Great, I thought. I'm meeting my roommate naked. He heaved the duffel into the room, closed the door, and walked over to me. I'm Chip Martin, he announced in a deep voice, the voice of a radio DJ. Before I could respond, he added, I'd shake your hand, but I think you should hold on damn tight to that towel so you can get some clothes on. I laughed and nodded my head at him. That's cool, right? The nod. And said, I'm Miles Halter. Nice to meet you. Miles, as in to go before I sleep, he asked me. Huh? It's a Robert Frost poem. You've never read him? I shook my head no. Consider yourself lucky, he smiled. I grabbed some clean underwear, a pair of blue Adidas soccer shorts, and a white t-shirt, mumbled that I'd be back in a second, and ducked back into the bathroom. So much for a good first impression. So where are your parents? I asked from the bathroom. My parents? The father's in California right now, maybe sitting in his lazy boy, maybe driving his truck. Either way, he's drinking. My mother is probably just now turning off campus. Oh, I said, dressed now, not sure how to respond to such personal information. I shouldn't have asked, I guess, if I didn't want to know. Chip grabbed some sheets and tossed them onto the top bunk. I'm a top bunk man, hope that doesn't bother you. No, whatever is fine. Steve decorated the place, he said, gesturing towards the world map. I like it. And then he started naming countries. He spoke in a monotone, as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, American Samoa, Andorra, and so on. He got through the A's before looking up and noticing my incredulous stare. I could do the rest, but it'd probably bore you. Something I learned over the summer. God, you can't imagine how boring New Hope, Alabama is in the summertime. Like watching soybeans grow. Where are you from, by the way? Florida, I said. Never been. That's pretty amazing, the country's thing, I said. Yeah, everybody's got talent. I can memorize things, and you can... I know a lot of people's last words. It was an indulgence learning last words. Other people had chocolate. I had dying declarations. Example. I like Henrik Ibsen's. He was a playwright. I knew a lot about Ibsen, but I'd never read any of his plays. I didn't like reading plays. I liked reading biographies. Yeah, I know who he was, said Chip. Right, well, he'd been sick for a while, and his nurse said to him, "You seem to be feeling better this morning." And Ibsen looked at her and said, "On the contrary," and then he died. Chip laughed. That's morbid, but I like it. He told me he was in his 3rd year at Culver Creek. He had started in 9th grade, the first year at the school. He was now a junior like me. A scholarship kid, he said. Got a full ride. He'd heard it was the best school in Alabama, so he wrote his application essay about how he wanted to go to a school where he could read long books. The problem, he said in the essay, was that his dad would always hit him with the books in his house, so Chip kept his books short and paperback for his own safety. His parents got divorced his sophomore year. He liked the creek, as he called it, but you have to be careful here, with students and with teachers. And I do hate being careful, he smirked. I hated being careful too, or wanted to at least. He had told me this while ripping through his duffel bag, throwing clothes into drawers with reckless abandon. Chip did not believe in having a sock drawer or a t-shirt drawer. He believed that all drawers were created equal and filled each with whatever fit. My mother would have died. As soon as he finished unpacking, Chip hit me roughly on the shoulder, said, "I hope you're stronger than you look," and walked out the door, leaving it open behind him. He peeked his head back in a few seconds later and saw me standing still. "Well, come on, miles to go, Halter. We got shit to do." We made our way to the TV room, which according to Chip contained the only cable TV on campus. Over the summer, it served as a storage unit. Packed nearly to the ceiling with couches, fridges, and rolled up carpets, TV room undulated with kids trying to find and haul away their stuff. Chip said hello to a few people, but didn't introduce me. As he wandered through the couch-stocked maze, I stood near the room's entrance, trying my best not to block pairs of roommates as they maneuvered furniture through the narrow front door. It took 10 minutes for Chip to find his stuff, and an hour more for us to make the 4 trips back and forth across the dorm circle between the TV room and room 43. By the end, I wanted to crawl into Chip's mini fridge and sleep for 1,000 years, but Chip seemed immune to both fatigue and heat stroke. I sat down on his couch. "I found it lying on a curb in my neighborhood a couple years ago," he said of the couch as he worked on setting up my PlayStation 2 on top of his footlocker. "I know the leather's got some cracks, but come on, that's a damn nice couch." The leather had more than a few cracks. It was about 30% baby blue faux leather and 70% foam, but it felt damn good to me anyway. "All right," he said. "We're about done." He walked over to his desk and pulled a roll of duct tape from the drawer. "We just need your trunk." I got up, pulled the trunk from out from under the bed, and Chip situated it between the couch and the PlayStation 2 and started tearing off thin strips of duct tape. He applied them to the trunk so that they spelled out "coffee table." "There," he said. He sat down and put his feet up on the coffee table. "Done." I sat down next to him and he looked over at me and suddenly said, "Listen, I'm not going to be your entree to the Culver Creek social life." Okay," I said, but I could hear the words catch in my throat. I just carried this guy's couch beneath a white-hot sun and now he didn't like me? "Basically, you've got 2 groups here," he explained, speaking with increasing urgency. "You've got the regular boarders like me, and then you've got the weekday warriors. They board here, but they're all rich kids who live in Birmingham and go home to their parents' air-conditioned mansions every weekend." Those are the cool kids. I don't like them. They don't like me. So if you come here thinking that you were hot shit at public school, so you'll be hot shit here, you'd best not be seen with me. You did go to public school, didn't you? I said. Absent-mindedly, I began picking at the cracks in the couch's leather, digging my fingers into the foamy whiteness. Right, you did probably, because if you had gone to private school, your frickin' shorts would fit, he laughed. I wore my shorts just below my hips, which I thought was cool. Finally, I said, yeah, I went to public school, but I wasn't hot shit there, Chip. I was regular shit. Huh, that's good. Don't call me Chip. Call me the Colonel. I stifled a laugh. The Colonel? Yeah, the Colonel. And we'll call you, Pudge. Huh. Pudge, the Colonel said, because you're skinny. It's called irony, Pudge. Ever heard of it? Now let's go get some cigarettes and start this year off right. He walked out of the room, again assuming I'd just follow, and this time I did. Mercifully, the sun was descending towards the horizon. We walked 5 doors down to room 48. A dry erase board was taped to the door using duct tape. In blue marker, it read, Alaska has a single. The Colonel explained to me that 1, this was Alaska's room, and that 2, she had a single room because the girl who was supposed to be her roommate got kicked out at the end of last year, and that 3, Alaska had cigarettes, although the Colonel neglected to ask whether 4, I smoked, which 5, I didn't. He knocked once, loudly. Through the door, a voice screamed, oh my God, come in, you short little man, because I have the best story. We walk in. I turned to close the door behind me, and the Colonel shook his head and said, after 7, you have to leave the door open if you're in a girl's room. But I barely heard him because the hottest girl in all of human history was standing before me in cut-off jeans and a peach tank top. And she was talking over the Colonel, talking loud and fast. So the first day of summer, I'm in Grand Old Vine Station with this boy named Justin. And we're at his house watching TV on the couch, and mind you, I'm already dating Jake. Actually, I'm still dating him, miraculously enough. But Justin is a friend of mine from when I was a kid. And so we're watching TV and literally chatting about the SATs or something, and Justin puts his arm around me. And I think, oh, that's nice. We've been friends for so long, and this is totally comfortable. And we're just chatting, and then I'm in the middle of a sentence about analogies or something, and like a hawk, he reaches down and honks my boob. Honk, a much too firm 2 to 3 second honk. And the first thing I thought was, okay, how do I extricate this claw from my boob before it leaves permanent marks? And the second thing I thought was, God, I can't wait to tell Takumi and the Colonel. The Colonel laughed. I stared, stunned partly by the force of the voice emanating from the petite, but God, curvy girl, and partly by the gigantic stacks of books that lined her walls. Her library filled her bookshelves and then overflowed into waist-high stacks of books everywhere, piled haphazardly against the walls. If just one of them moved, I thought, the domino effect could engulf the 3 of us in an asphyxiating mass of literature. Who's the guy that's not laughing at my very funny story? She asked. Oh, right. Alaska, this is Pudge. Pudge memorizes people's last words. Pudge, this is Alaska. She got her boob honked over the summer. She walked over to me with her hand extended. They made a quick move downward at the last moment and pulled down my shorts. Those are the biggest shorts in the state of Alabama. I like them baggy, I said, embarrassed, and pulled them up. They had been cool back home in Florida. So far in our relationship, Pudge, I've seen your chicken legs entirely too often, the Colonel deadpanned. So Alaska, sell us some cigarettes. And then somehow the Colonel talked me into paying $5 for a pack of Marlboro Lights I had no intention of ever smoking. He asked Alaska to join us, but she said, I have to find Takumi and tell him about the honk. She turned to me and asked, have you seen him? I had no idea whether I had seen Takumi since I had no idea who he was. I just shook my head. All right, meet you at the lake in a few minutes then. The Colonel nodded. At the edge of the lake just before the sandy, and the Colonel told me, fake beach. We sat down at an Adirondack swing. I made the obligatory joke, don't grab my boob. The Colonel gave an obligatory laugh, then asked, want to smoke? I had never smoked a cigarette, but when in Rome. Is it safe here? Not really, he said, then lit a cigarette and handed it to me. I inhaled, coughed, wheezed, gasped for breath, coughed again, considered vomiting, grabbed the swinging bench, head spinning, and threw the cigarette to the ground and stomped on it, convinced my great perhaps did not involve cigarettes. Smoke much, he laughed, then pointed to a white speck across the lake and said, "See that?" "Yeah," I said. "What's that, a bird?" "It's the swan," he said. "Wow, a school with a swan. Wow. That swan is the spawn of Satan. Never get closer to it than we are now." "Why?" "It has some issues with people. It was abused or something. It'll rip you to pieces. The eagle put it there to keep us from walking around the lake to smoke." "The eagle?" "Mr. Starnes, codenamed the Eagle, the dean of students. Most of the teachers live on campus and they'll all bust you. But only the eagle lives in the dorm circle, and he sees all. He can smell a cigarette from like 5 miles. "Isn't his house back there?" I asked, pointing to it. I could see the house quite clearly despite the darkness, so I followed. He could probably see us. "Yeah, but he doesn't really go into blitzkrieg mode until the classes start," Chip said nonchalantly. "Good, because if I get in trouble, my parents will kill me," I said. "I suspect you're exaggerating, but look, you're going to get in trouble. 99% of the time, your parents have to know, though. The school doesn't want your parents to think you became a fuck-up here any more than you want your parents to think you're a fuck-up." He blew a thin stream of smoke forcefully toward the lake. I had to admit, he looked cool doing it. Taller, somehow. "Anyway, when you get in trouble, just don't tell on anyone. I mean, I hate the rich snots here with a fervent passion I usually reserve only for dental work and my father. But that doesn't mean I would rat them out. Pretty much the only important thing is never, 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 never rat." "Okay," I said, although I wondered, if someone punches me in the face, I'm supposed to insist that I ran into a door? It seemed a little stupid. How do you deal with bullies and assholes if you don't get them into trouble? I didn't ask Chip, though. "All right, Pudge. We've reached the point in the evening when I'm obliged to go and find my girlfriend. So give me a few of those cigarettes you'll never smoke anyway, and I'll see you later." I decided to hang out in the swing for a while, half because the heat had finally dissipated into a pleasant, if muggy 80-something, and half because I thought Alaska might show up. But almost as soon as the colonel left, the bugs encroached. No seums, which, for the record, you can see, and the mosquitoes hovered around me in such numbers that the tiny noise of their rubbing wings sounded cacophonous. A lot of big words in this book. And then I decided to smoke. Now, I did think the smoke would drive the bugs away. And to some degree it did. I'd be lying, though, if I claimed I became a smoker to ward off insects. I became a smoker because, 1, I was on an Adirondack swing by myself, and 2, I had cigarettes, and 3, I figured that if anyone else could smoke a cigarette without coughing, I could damn well too. In short, I didn't have a very good reason. So yeah, let's just say that before it was the bugs. I made it through 3 entire drags before I felt nauseous and dizzy and only semi-pleasantly buzzed. I got up to leave. As I stood, a voice behind me said, "So do you really memorize last words?" She ran up beside me and grabbed my shoulder and pushed me back onto the porch swing. "Yeah," I said, and then hesitantly I added, "You want to quiz me?" "JFK," she said. "That's obvious," I answered. "Oh, is it now?" she asked. "No, those were his last words. Someone said, 'Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you.' And he said, 'That's obvious.' And then he got shot." She laughed. "God, that's awful. I shouldn't laugh, but I will." And then she laughed again. "Okay, Mr. Famous last words, boy. I have one for you." She reached into her overstuffed backpack and pulled out a book. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, The General in His Labyrinth. Absolutely one of my favorites. It's about Simon Bolivar. I didn't know who Simon Bolivar was, but she didn't give me a time to ask. It's a historical novel, so I don't know if this is true. But in the book, do you know what his last words are? No, you don't. But I'm about to tell you, Senor Parting Remarks. And then she lit a cigarette and sucked on it so hard for so long that I thought the entire thing might burn off in one drag. She exhaled and read to me. He, that's Simon Bolivar, was shaken by the overwhelming revelation that the headlong race between his misfortunes and his dreams was at that moment reaching the finish line. The rest was darkness. Damn it, he sighed. Well, how will I ever get out of this labyrinth? I knew great last words when I heard them, and I made a mental note to get a hold of the biography of this Simon Bolivar fellow. Beautiful last words, but I didn't quite understand. So what's the labyrinth? I asked her. And now is as good a time as any to say that she was beautiful. In the dark beside me, she smelled of sweat and sunshine and vanilla. And on that thin-mooned night, I could see little more than her silhouette except for when she smoked, when the burning cherry of the cigarette washed her face in pale red light. But even in the dark, I could see her eyes, fierce emeralds. She had the kind of eyes that predisposed you to supporting her every endeavor. And not just beautiful, but hot, too, with her breasts straining against her tight tank top, her curved legs swinging back and forth between the swing, flip-flops dangling from her electric blue-painted toes. It was right then, between when I asked about the labyrinth and when she answered me, that I realized the importance of curves, of the 1,000 places where girls' bodies ease from one place to another, from arc of the foot to ankle to calf, from calf to hip to waist to breast to neck to ski slope nose, to forehead to shoulder, to the concave arch of the back, to the butt, to the etc. I had noticed curves before, of course, but I had never quite apprehended their significance. Her mouth, close enough to me that I could feel her breath warmer than the air, she said, "That's the mystery, isn't it? Is the labyrinth living or dying? Which is he trying to escape? The world or the end of it?" I waited for her to keep talking, but after a while it became obvious she wanted an answer. "I don't know," I said finally. "Have you really read all those books in your room?" "Oh God, no. I've read maybe a third of them, but I'm going to read them all. I call it my life's library. Every summer since I was little, I've gone to garage sales and bought all the books that looked interesting, so I always have something to read. But there's so much to do, cigarettes to smoke, sex to have, swings to swing on. I'll have more time for reading when I'm old and boring." She told me I reminded her of the Colonel when he came to Culver Creek. They were freshmen together, she said, both scholarship kids with, as she put it, a shared interest in booze and mischief. The phrase booze and mischief left me wondering I'd stumbled into what my mother referred to as the wrong crowd. But for the wrong crowd, they both seemed awfully smart. As she lit a new cigarette off the butt of her previous one, she told me that the Colonel was smart, but hadn't done much living when he got to the creek. I got rid of that problem quickly, she smiled. By November, I'd gotten him his first girlfriend, a perfectly nice, non-weekday warrior named Janice. He dumped her after a month because she was too rich for his poverty-soaked blood, but whatever. We pulled our first prank that year. We filled classroom 4 with a thin layer of marbles. We've progressed some since then, of course. She laughed. So Chip became the Colonel, the military-style planner of their pranks. And Alaska was ever Alaska, the larger-than-life creative force behind them. "You're smart like him," she said. "Quieter, though, and cuter, but I didn't even just say that because I love my boyfriend." "Yeah, you're not bad either," I said, overwhelmed by her compliment. "But I didn't just say that because I love my girlfriend." "Oh, wait, right. I don't have one." She laughed. "Yeah, don't worry, Pudge. If there's one thing I can get you, it's a girlfriend. Let's make a deal. You figure out what the labyrinth is and how to get out of it, and I'll get you laid." Deal. We shook on it. Later, I walked toward the dorm circle beside Alaska. The cicadas hummed their one-note song just as they had at home in Florida. She turned to me as we made our way through the darkness and said, "When you're walking at night, do you ever get creeped out and even though it's silly and embarrassing, you just want to run home?" It seemed too secret and personal to admit to a virtual stranger. that I told her, yeah, totally. For a moment, she was quiet. Then she grabbed my hand, whispered, run, 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 and took off, pulling me behind her. I think that is where we're going to stop with looking for Alaska today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you want more of these reading videos. This book could definitely get us through the summer. So yeah, just let me know. I hope you enjoyed.